Much of the power goes to Quebec. Since the 70s, Labrador West has been powered by electricity. All the heat is electricity, and basically renewable energy, and all the carbon footprint from the project is pretty much consumed at this point. So sitting there, started this internet company, and we were trying to figure out how somebody gives us money to put fiber to the home in this Churchill Falls community. Young guys, don't really have much credit or history. And we're sitting around my garage one day, 2016, and one of the guys like, why don't we buy Bitcoin to raise money to put internet in Churchill Falls? I'm like, what's that? Basically, the rabbit hole opened. We started with one miner on a shelf in my garage, and basically spun on from there. We applied for power, very low rate of power, so started applying equipment. We're now Newfoundland Labrador's largest Bitcoin miner. We've got 14 megawatts built over the past 7 years or so. Eventually did get an RFP to put fiber in Churchill Falls, launched Big Link Internet, which we're a fiber ISP now as well. So didn't actually have to use the Bitcoin money for that, but it started down that road, and then BlockLab actually spun out from Big Land Networks and became its own entity and started getting a lot of traction here with this renewable energy cold climate that we're in.
So you got the first miner plugged in. What year was that in the garage?
There was 2016. It was a batch 2 S9. We basically all threw in $1,000 each or something and bought this miner and put it on a shoe rack in the corner of my garage. And a week in, we're like, why did we buy S9s when we could buy 10 S7s for the same price? Very little power price, the Canadian 3.1 cents for residential, somewhere around 2.2 US. So even residential power is very expensive here. So we realized very quickly that waiting for Bitmain to ship a new batch of high demand miners versus going on Amazon somewhere and buying 10 S7s, get 40 or 50 terahash for the 13 or 11, I think at that point you would have gotten. So realized very quickly that we didn't need to be cutting edge with our power prices so cheap. So bought 10 S7s next, and then eventually took over an old grocery store, put 150 S7s in, just basically the chiller power that was in this old grocery store. That basically got us going. Eventually we swapped those out for S9s and started applying for bigger power.
And that's one of the biggest things about Bitcoin mining that I see outside investors who don't really understand is, let's say, the power cost, how that scales, and how it allows you to run these machines for a much longer lifespan. And to your point, I can get S7s faster. I can get them so cheap. Back then, and the example would be maybe S19s today, because people aren't really making much money off of it. But having 2-cent power is almost twice as good as having like 4-cent power, and then like 4 times as good as 8-cent power. But you don't really think about that when you're getting into the industry. You're like, oh, I'm going to try running at 6.5 cents. And that can still be a very, very profitable business. But you guys have really found the gold in Labrador per se out of these iron mines. And they're like, we have so much cheap electricity, and not so much of it, but just cheap electricity in general, which gives you a much longer lifespan, lets you run a very different business where your capital allocation strategy is to just terahashes, less efficiency. So tell me about that journey of building from the grocery store into the 14 megawatts today, and highlight maybe the biggest kind of operational challenge you guys faced and how hard it is to run a 24/7 operation in a small town that is more remote than, let's say, a big city like Quebec or outside of New York City. Or
Absolutely, yeah. So we like to joke that if we take no for an answer, we would have been gone long ago. We started basically in that garage. We outgrew the garage pretty quickly, got that grocery store, and realized that there's power here in Labrador. Not a ton of available power because the contract with Quebec to export power is a long, drawn-out contract for hours, but realized very quickly that residential power at 3 cents Canadian, commercial at 2.3, industrial at 1.6. Rarely do you see these big jumps lower in power for bigger consumption. So we actually applied in 2017 for 20 megawatts in Labrador West. Province Premier came out and basically said, yes, they're getting 20 megawatts. The hydro utility came back and said, we don't have that available. We need to study what we've got for power. We can give you 7.75. So, okay, off to the races. We've got 7.75 megawatts, cheapest power in the world. We're ready to go. Banks don't like Bitcoin at that point. They still don't. Financiers, again, back to the thing where we're young and don't have a lot of history. Really hard to finance these things, even though we're soaked in it and really believing that we can do it. But one of those things where you've got to order transformers. We have a 46,000 volt standard energy grid here in Labrador West, which was built by the mines in the 60s, 70s. I guess they got it on sale or something at 46 kV. It's not a very common voltage. So next thing our engineers like, you have to order custom transformers. There's nobody that makes these. You need to go find somebody that will make a 46 kV transformer, 50-week lead time, etc. So all off to the races, and then hurry up and wait. We sit there and wait for your equipment. Even at that point, there wasn't a lot of pod manufacturers and so on. So we bought one pod, built our own after that because Labrador's climate is challenging. We get snow in late October. We have it until just last week. The snow melted here in May. So it's a cold climate, very windy. So we ended up building our own pods for that site. During that, we ended up with somebody reached out to us in 2019. There was a local group here that had power. They were building. They went out of business famously. Great North Data. I'm sure your listeners have probably heard of them. They had everything ahead of them. We were one monitor on a shoe rack in my garage when they started building, but they kind of pre-sold their next site to pay for one site and ended up getting themselves pretty backwards on their infrastructure. We had somebody call one day. We're sitting there waiting on our transformers that are going to be at 50-week lead time. This guy calls and says, we're sick of our tenants. We've got a site in Goose Bay, Labrador, which is in Labrador East, 6 megawatts. We're sick of these guys. We want somebody to come make an offer. And we know you guys are in Labrador West building. So took a drive. My wife's actually from Goose Bay on the other side of Labrador. So took a drive over and walked into this site. Transformers are sitting there. The owners are ready to make a deal. So through the jigs and the reels, we ended up making that deal with them. The site was ready to go. Basically, we had to finish the connections and finish the actual mining infrastructure, but managed to get it online. We took it over in 2019 and had it online in 2020, which really saved us because waiting that lead time for your transformers, you're sitting around spinning, burning capital, waiting to be able to build. So luckily, I managed to get that site, build it up, and it's been running now since 2020. So 6 megawatts, basically the cheapest power in the world. I know.
And I love that because it truly is the cheapest power in the world. Now let's zoom out and just talk through why it's the cheapest power in the North America, and also why it isn't 100 megawatt public mining companies there. So there's two, I think, very unique opportunities that came about because you are a local and because of your ability to navigate local politics. So talk more about how important that is as a miner, but then also what gives this area the cheap energy.
Yeah, so basically the iron ore mining industry, basically in the 60s, before they had roads into Labrador, they were flying infrastructure in to be able to build these mines. So Twin Falls Generating Plant is a 200 megawatt generating plant that the Iron Ore Company of Canada built in the late 50s to power their site in Labrador West. When Newfoundland Labrador Hydro started this deal with Quebec to build the Churchill Falls Generating Station, about 5,500 megawatts, built completely with no roads in the region. They dug through a mountain. The actual spillways and turbines are all built inside of a mountain. Made 100 plus land, earth dikes, no real.
That amount of megawatts, why do they choose? That's so much. Why would they choose that? Was there like a bigger vision you're aware of?
No, so it was Churchill Falls was a waterfall on the Churchill River. So very early on in the explorers' history, they discovered that the potential water, if they were to dam off, make a reservoir, they'd have this power. So Quebec really needed power even then. They still do now. Made a deal with Newfoundland Labrador to build up this site. British Newfoundland Co. is what the company was originally. Winston Churchill was involved in this development, basically. And during the middle or so of the build, the plane crash happened. The plane was coming into Labrador West, crashed with the entire C-suite of Brinco on board. Thought the mine lights in my IOC were the lights of the runway. It crashed into the mountain, completely wiped out the C-suite of Brinco. Quebec took advantage of that opportunity, basically. Not to comment on whether it was good or bad, but they ended up getting a very, very sweetheart deal to finish the project for Newfoundland, where there was no escalator clauses. They ended up paying 0.02 cent, 0.0002 cents per kilowatt hour up until 2041. Basically what this deal ended up with. 5,000 megawatts of the 5,500 megawatts. So over the last 40, 50 years, Newfoundland has made into the hundreds of millions. Quebec has made multiple billions on this project. So power was basically required for the iron mine development as well as exporting to Quebec. So that's why they built it. And when we were sitting there realizing, look, we've got tons of power here in our backyard, we can use this. to your question, many companies did come in here. There was at one point 8,000 megawatts of applications for power cryptocurrency miners early, say 2020-ish, 2021. We had heard talking to the executives and so on at Hydro that thousands of megawatts applied. So we applied for 1,100 megawatts. Like if somebody else is going to have it, we're going to have it as well. So put it in. That was around 2020. They came back and said, pay $1,000 per megawatt if you're serious. The 8,000 went to 1,800. 600 of that was us. We borrowed the money. We put the money on file. Told them, yep, we want it, study it, we'll fund it. And 12 months later, the Newfoundland Labrador government put an order in council in banning cryptocurrency from firm power. Gave every penny back, didn't study it basically for the year like they had agreed to, because I guess we called their bluff, and that just they're contractually obligated to sell power to Quebec. So we see 500 megawatts at that point, 800 more came out. There's 2,200 more in Gull Island to be built now over the next little while. Churchill Falls has an upgrade project to add another 1,100 megawatts. Plus, they've replaced the turbines, which adds another 1,000, about 10,000 megawatts of energy, hydro energy on this river. And the answer is still, from their point of view, we don't have power. So it's very troubling from our point of view. We ended up building the Black Eye Great North data put on the industry. Didn't help us in any way. So we were very adamant in getting it to the community, getting our logos out, sponsoring teams, sponsoring what we could. Getting the message out there that this is an industry that is not iron mining. It's not linked to the iron mining cycle. Why not hedge your bets a little bit? 32 employees at this point now that all get paid by Bitcoin being generated. So,
and with 32 employees, I understand if you're in your house or you're in the grocery store and you're just starting the company, but with 32 employees, do you feel like the community now looks at you guys like a real industry? Like how does that feel?
Locally, the community does. The province still, we made an argument at one point, we're like, we have 32 employees. This is Block Lab, our group of companies, the internet service provider that serves internet to Indigenous reserves, etc. We're like, we have 32 employees making good money in Labrador that aren't iron-based. Their answer is, well, we've got 30 people in the export division trying to export the power out of the province into New York and New England. So it's one of those things.